Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to everyone who has submitted questions for this Q&A. I'm doing this quite informally, because I'd kind of just want to kick back and enjoy this without getting, playing to the usual level of anal retention that I usually have when I make something. So I've got my weird Spotify playlist in the background. The Doctor is in. Before we start, if anyone who sent me a question has a channel or a project on, I will post links to those in the description. Also, if I mention specific sort of films and stuff especially ones I recommend, I'll post links to those as well. First question comes from Andrew Bota Burgenis. I can never remember if I'm pronouncing that surname correctly. I apologise, Andrew, if I got it wrong. This might sound like I'm trying to lead you, but separate the question from the questioner if you can. Out of all the movies you've reviewed, or one you're planning to review, what team would you most like to work with on something, and why? I think I'd have to go with someone who I have the most affinity with, because I do have my own projects that I want to work on in the future. And while obviously, I don't mean this to sound too pretentious, but while obviously you want to stay true to your own vision, there's Rob Ulitsky, who made VR, is probably the person I'd use as an example to answer this question. Largely because I really love a lot of what he works with. I love his colour palettes. I love his design of his films. Also, thematically, his interests seem to align with a lot of mine. We're both interested in urban legends. We both love creepypastas. There's also that kicker about how those two things sort of intertwine with modern technology and things like that. So I'm not fishing, Rob, but if I was going to work with someone who I'd reviewed, that would be you. Unfortunately for you. This one is from Mark Humphrey, who was someone I worked with way back in the day when I started out in book selling for Waterstones. Tell us again, why is Confessions of a Window Cleaner your favourite movie of all time? I can't even summon up the sarcasm. I've never hated a film as much as I hate Confessions of a Window Cleaner. And it's, in terms of production or anything, it's not even the worst film I've ever seen. I just find it incredibly mean-spirited. And I'm not opposed to smut. I'm not opposed to edgy comedy or anything like that. But there is that obvious sort of caveat that if you're making a comedy, it has to be funny. And Confessions is just badly written. It has no substance to it. Beyond this rather sort of mean-spirited ideal about how it's great to cheat on your pregnant wife and, sleep with as many women as possible. And I'm not saying that if you sleep around, if you want to have lots of sexual partners, that's bad. I do not believe that at all. But there is just the tone of the film is very, very skewed and sort of mean-spirited in that regard. I'm probably not explaining it that well, but if you've seen the film, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. That being said, there are a lot of things I do regret about my review. I think some of my analogies and examples and stuff were a little bit severe. And also I should have done a better job of sort of drawing a distinction between the character of Timmy Lee and the actor Robin Asquith. The reason I say this is because I think I described Asquith as a rapey voyeur fucktard. And that's not fair, because from what I can tell about the guy, he seems he's a bit showy, he seems like a bit much, but he seems ultimately like a decent human being, and I think that was something which betrayed my sort of inexperience a little bit. So I do kind of regret things like that, but the points I made in the video I do stand by. I think it's absolutely wretched. And some people have said to me before, so do you not like carry-on films then? Because there's some similarity to them. They're from a similar period. They have similar sensibilities about sex and things like that. The difference is that carry-on films are very funny, or most of them are, they're very humorous. They're very well written. They have great performances. Also, while, women in those films tend to be objectified quite heavily, but the men in those films don't always come off that well. You know, they're often like they're cucks, or they're just made to look ridiculous frequently and things like that. I mean, like, obviously, like, a lot of people would talk about Kenneth Williams and Charles Hawtrey and people like that, but my favourite Carry On film is Carry On Screaming, and Harry H. Corbett is, like, ridiculous in that film. He's this uptight sort of police inspector, and, you know, yeah, he's completely enthralled to the sort of one of the main female characters, and he just gets made to look ridiculous. And also, I say, the aspect, the most important aspect is the humour angle, because if you're making a comedy, it should be funny. And also, if you are dealing with slightly edgy topics, humour can take the edge off a little bit, and also it can help sort of redirect things. It can make you take a little step to the side to be able to see things differently. Yeah, I can't even joke about it. I hate that film so much. Other people have asked me if I'm going to review the sequels. Maybe one day. Maybe if enough people... Oh, actually, no, I shouldn't say that because now everyone's going to ask. But maybe. I haven't... I've got Pop Performer. Maybe one day. But hopefully not. Yeah, this question is from Laszlo Kovacs, who's actually the director of Abstract Messiah. Do you prefer a film to have an overt message, or be one that makes you, or it's one that's open to interpretation or makes you work for a meaning, or one that's just a fun roller coaster ride? There's a great quote from one of my favourite authors, a woman called Caitlin R. Kiernan, and the quote I think is, "It is my job to try to make the world chew, lest its lazy jaw muscles atrophy, and its collective mandible withers, and all its teeth fall out." So I'm basically trying to say that I'm going with the second point on that. I like stuff that's open to interpretation and makes you work for it. And to be honest, I think pretty much every film does that. Even the most sort of shallow, superficial, brainless film, there's always a certain interaction back and forth between creator and audience. I don't think film can ever be truly passive. It's obviously, as a medium, it's not as obviously not as interactive as like gaming, for example, but you're still going to be sitting there making connections and coming up with ideas and interpreting things. But films that really push that, ones which really challenge you, are obviously my favourite sort of film. Yeah, I don't want my teeth to fall out. This one is from Graham Blake, who is the sort of editor-in-chief of MovieBlogger.com. He's effectively... Well, he's my boss, basically. He actually asked me quite a lot of really interesting questions, but I'm trying to keep this as democratic as I can, or at least as egalitarian as I can. So I've chosen, if you were introducing a short film to someone, what is the one short you would tell them to watch? I studied filmmaking and film criticism at the University of East London between 2002 and 2005. I presume it's the same pretty much wherever you study film formally, but there are certain films you will always get introduced to. So you've got like the Lumiere films, George Méliès. There's one called Meshes of the Afternoon by a female director from the 40s called Maya Deren. That's a great film. So there's things like that. But the key one, the one that I would assume appears in every single film course, is Luis Buñuel's Un Chien Andalou. It was made with Salvador Dali, and it's a very early example of what you can be done with short films, of what can be done on a limited runtime, without necessarily big budget resources and things like that. The limited sort of means of the technology of the time as well. It's a very interesting film. It's sort of quite heart-stopping in moments. It's quite dark, very controversial for its time as well. Particularly for its surrealist imagery, but also, you know, there's a very iconic scene of a woman getting her eye cut open with a razor blade, and it's not in like a very it's not like a guinea pig film or something, or like a snuff film, but you know, for the time it was made, it's still, you know, incredibly provocative. So yeah, I would say Un Chien Andalou, and not a hard film to find as well. I think it's on I think it's definitely on Vimeo. I think it's on YouTube as well, so I'll post a link. This one's from George Overington, who has a review channel on YouTube. I think he's in production on a short film at the moment as well, so I'll put details to that in the description. I think there's actually a Kickstarter running, so yeah, I'll put that down there for you, George. Do you prefer doing more down-to-earth style reviews, or do you plan to make big story-driven reviews in the future? There were two people who inspired me to start doing this. The first one was Charlie Emma Hay, who reviews books. She has a YouTube channel where she talks about books. We used to work for the same company, and I found out she was doing this. We both sort of left the company around the same time as well. And I found out she was doing this thing, and I was like, oh, I've always loved sort of reviews. And I was like, well, Charlie's doing this, so... You know, I was just really impressed by how bold she was being about it. So I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a go. The other person was Brad Jones, who reviews on a channel called The Cinema Snob, which is one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen. And his channel often deals with very obscure things. So I realised that sort of my love of obscure and insane and stuff as well. You know, you can talk about that and people will probably want to listen. The Cinema Snob is under the banner of something called Channel Awesome, which has brung together over the years some of the best content creators on the internet. And they used to do a great line in sort of crossover events, particularly for like yearly anniversaries of the site's existence. They did one called To Boldly Flee, which is a sci-fi comedy. There's a because it was a mini-series, and there's like a 3-hour super edit on YouTube. And it doesn't feel like a 3-hour film because it's so entertaining, it's so funny, so intelligent. It crams in an insane amount of references into one story. So yeah, I remember, like, especially when I was like thinking about doing videos, I remember looking at stuff like that and thinking, I would absolutely love to be involved in something like this. I want to work with other people. I may be doing something with Matt in the future, though we're just tossing ideas around at the moment. And I'm well up for that. But I think the market is different now. I think people want more streamlined content. And I think I'm personally more suited to like, sort of keeping things as narrow as I can, in terms of focus at least. I don't like to have videos go on too long, which is probably going to be ironic given what I'm recording right now. I like to kind of like get in and get out if I can, which is, I know that might sound a bit strange because I'm quite verbose and that, and I go off on tangents and things, but I'm trying to rein it in a little bit and focus more. But at the same time, I do like story elements, which is, you know, the obvious one is Victoria, the inanimate rat, who Catherine Kustra does the voice for. I want to do more stuff with her in that. So no, I prefer sort of more down-to-earth reviews, but I'm not closed off to story-driven ones. This one is from my friend Dan DeChico. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? I really like this question. A horse-sized duck, I presume, would not be as fast as a horse. So I think it'd actually be quite easy to flank. I think that it's not as mobile. I think you'd be able to find cover easier. I think something as monstrous as that would unless you're out in like the middle of nowhere, I think it would draw attention quite quickly. So you'd get like the authorities closing in on it. It'd be easier to shoot in the face or hit with an axe. Also, like 100 of smaller organisms can get around you. They can flank you much easier. They can overwhelm you. Even if you kill a couple of them, they will be able to regroup. So I think as long as you're careful, I think a horse-sized duck is the better option. I think this is an issue I don't think the government's done enough to educate people on. I think it's something you do need to consider, particularly the troubled times we're in. Yeah, I would definitely say horse-sized duck. This one's from Marvin K. Brown. Do you think the XMen franchise has died out now? I wouldn't say that, but I think it was running out of steam. It was definitely losing its way. I didn't mind Apocalypse that much, but at the same time, it did feel like, yeah, we need to put this in a box for a while. We need to let this thing sort of regenerate. And then obviously Logan came along and it capped it off in a really, really interesting way and a really beautiful way. So it's not died off, but it's definitely in need of serious sort of rest and recuperation. Yeah, it needs to revitalised, and then we can bring it back at a later date. Hopefully part of the MCU. Hopefully finally that whole issue, that rights issue, can be resolved. Because I think Matt has made this point a couple of times that it would be amazing to have an House of M movie. Even if it was like a trilogy or something, that would be an incredible story to see. And you cannot have that without the X-Men. Hard times. This one is from Matt himself. Who would you like to see play an adult X-23? Given how great she was in Logan, I would actually kind of like Daphne Keane to grow with the role. But obviously there are issues there, particularly in terms of continuity, because Logan was obviously set in, I think, 2029. So I know X-Men has no problem with time travel, but I don't know, to try and sort of square the circle would be a bit difficult. So that in mind, I really struggled with this one, but moviepilot.com actually did like one of their sort of flimsy top 10 lists, and they included an actress called Kaya Scodelario, she's an English actress. I think she's in the new Pirates of the Caribbean film. She has the right look for an adult Laura. And obviously, I think she was in things like The Maze Runner as well. So she has something of an action background. So, purely for a hypothetical, I'll say Kaya Scodelario. This is from Anonymous. A person who's anonymous, I suspect, not the collective. What's the most moving film scene you've ever seen? This is a really tricky one, obviously, because there's so many you can probably think of, and everyone you can think of, other people could probably point out 100 more you've missed. I've always said that, like, I don't know if it's controversial to say that John Hurt's death scene in Alien is the best death scene in the history of cinema. I don't know if too many people would argue against that. The second best death scene, in my opinion, is Boromir's death from Fellowship of the Ring. That's actually going to be my answer to this specific question, because it never fails to amaze and impress, and it really wins me over every single time. I think it's such a great redemptive moment. It's so, it's this man recapturing his honour, the bravery on display, it is just incredibly powerful, and the little, interaction that him and Aragorn have just as he lay dying. I think it's incredibly potent emotionally, and I think it's also, I'm going to give it as an answer for the most moving scene I've ever seen in a film. Also, it's just one of my favourite moments in cinema, full stop. This one's from Twitter. This is from @KXNPunk. What is your favourite thing in life? I wasn't going to answer this originally because I thought it was a bit too broad. And I thought about it, it's not really, is it? Favourite thing in life, I think... I don't want to say I sound like too much of an arsehole when I say this, but it's being surprised. And there are many ways in which that can happen. Not just like, obviously coming home and finding presents or a party or something, but just more everyday things like learning something new or seeing something in a new way. And obviously, became an uncle the first time a couple of years ago. And one thing I never realised about kids in the past is that they constantly surprise you. Often in ways you might not expect. So it's things like that. Every day you're learning something, every time you're discovering something. And I think I like to find it personally satisfying to maximise that as much as possible. Again, it's another reason why I started making videos, because even though I studied filmmaking formally, I wasn't the tech guy. I was a guy I was more involved with production and writing than anything else. So when I've come to this point in my life where I decided I want to do this, I'm basically having to teach myself how to record and things. I barely know how to use the camera that I've been making things on. which I'm sure comes across in a lot of the videos. But, you know, I mean, like, editing I'm find incredibly fascinating. I may actually be... This is not confirmed, this is something I'm thinking about doing, but I may actually be building a specific computer. There's obviously a lot of caveats to that, but that's definitely something I'm looking into. So yeah, that's my favourite thing in life, I think, is being surprised. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you watching. Hopefully this didn't drag on too long. Hopefully you could hear me, because I insist on listening to this music. And I'm actually just started... Shura's just come on. So, yes, I'm just going to drown myself in her awesomeness.